Thank you.
Okay, it is 6 o'clock by my watch, and the meeting is called to order. And the first order of business is a review and adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
I move we adopt the agenda.
As published.
As published.
Thank you. I have a motion. Is there a discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. Under new business, we will review and discuss the two amendments to the zoning regulations that the Select Board has proposed. I should tell you that the Select Board is in the process of revising the zoning regulations in their entirety. We have applied for a grant to hire the RPC, the Regional Planning Commission, to help us rewrite the zoning regulations as the Select Board have envisioned it. There are some things that are easy to do. Some of them will require some discussion from the members of the Planning Commission, with the help of Martha, perhaps, if we get the grant. And and if we don't get the grant, we'll have to reassess how extensive the changes will be. But that's the background. And as a first step, the Select Board have decided that they want to do two things. They want to add short-term rentals as a conditional use. And as you know, uses have a bunch of conditions that are attached to them, and they will apply to all of those, including the short-term rentals. And also they want to, under the definition page, they want to add what the state has told us is a definition that they have adopted as a defining what a short-term rental is. So that's the background, and the discussion is questions, and Jason has been working with the Select Board for some time now, and he knows very much what they're looking for. And so he's agreed to be here to answer whatever questions you might have.
Jason, I just have a question. There were two ways to go about this. There was a Select Board ordinance, and then there was a zoning board conditional use.
Yep.
And there seems to be significant differences between the two. Why was this venue chosen?
So around this time last year, we were working with you all to come up with some zoning language.
Right.
We did that. Once the Select Board got it, they were kicking it around for a number of months, and my understanding is they ultimately decided, we should get a legal review. So they did. They went to the VLCT. One of the attorneys there gave them an opinion on short-term rental language as proposed, and they also just looked at the whole zoning document. They said, geez, you guys, you wrote it with all these standards for short-term rentals in zoning. We don't really think you should do that. We think that's better done through an ordinance. And essentially, again, my understanding, the attorney said, you can do this, this, what I'm calling phase one, add short-term rentals as a conditional use, but none of the standards we talked about the last time. And then the Select Board wants to bring that to the voters at town meeting. And again, I think get the sense the board knows what they want to do, ordinance or not. So that's what I'm calling phase 3. If the Select Board decides to do an ordinance, that would be a future next step.
So that's not off the table.
It's not off the table, and again, this was really based on the attorney's recommendation.
Okay.
I have a question. The stipulations that we had written last year, my understanding is they expired. The select board's by not acting, right?
Yeah, by not acting within a year, they have now expired. Yeah, essentially not approved or not adopted.
So, as a conditional use, if somebody with no ordinance, could you explain to us how that would, let's say by ordinance they adopt some more specifics along the lines that we did or other towns do. What would be the difference between them doing that and not, and assuming we have a conditional use here?
Right, so with this, again, phase one.
This goes.
Yep. So again, it's simply, there's, like Joe said, two changes. We're adding short-term rentals to the conditional use list, and then it's defining. So you get an application for conditional use after that, and you go, do they meet the conditional use standards? Yes or no? And if yes, there we go, approved. It's as simple as that. So you basically be looking at, the character of the area and the traffic, and I'm forgetting one of the other.
Parking.
There are very specific requirements under the conditional uses that are, there are the list of 5 things that would apply to everyone. And just as a background, the select board is aware that they can either do it by ordinance or can do it by amending the zoning regulations. They chose to do the first thing, the first part of it, by amending the regulations, because they prefer to have the voters decide whether any changes are going to be happening. And so, because they didn't want to do it by themselves, they wanted a reading of the voters on how they view short-term rentals in its entirety. So I think that's how they chose to do the first stage by amending the zoning regulations, because they had the town meeting come up, and the timeline is enough for them for us to have our public hearing, for them to have the public hearing, and then submit it to the voters in the morning. So I think they may in fact expand on the definitions or on the regulations themselves by adopting an ordinance, which I think my preference would be, because an ordinance is easier amended. You can change an ordinance a lot faster than you can the regulations.
So, Jason, from your viewpoint, which direction have towns gone? Ordinance or this?
It's a little bit of a mixed bag. We start when we were drafting this stuff for you last year. We were looking at what Woodstock had in large measure, and a few other towns. Woodstock and a few others do it through zoning, and there are a few examples out there like that. At that point, I wasn't aware that there were any court cases against Woodstock, so I thought it made some sense. There's a bunch of other towns, probably more towns are doing it to an ordinance. So Killington, Plymouth, Chester.
Killington originally had it this way.
They did, and their attorney said, no, go ordinance, and so, there's examples on either side, but, if you have the VLCT, I think you got some of that. They do try to explain zoning versus ordinance and what so that might be helpful.
Yeah, I guess this is a question for the select board, but maybe, no, I've seen more than enough. But I guess this is a question for you, Joe, or for you, Jason. From the select board, you mentioned this is phase 1, but
yes, how
are they intending on going to the public to ask what type of standards, or are they? Because that's where we've experienced pushback from the select board whenever we bring up standards. And I didn't know if they were even intending to go past this.
Well, they are required to have a public hearing. But let me just go back, and reiterate what I said to someone before. The process in amending a regulation in the state of Vermont is that the process has to start with the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission has to review whatever suggestions have come in and have a public hearing about that. After the public hearing, the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the Select Board, at which time the Select Board owns the process. They in fact, have to have another public hearing because they need to know what the public feels about it. And then they decide how to go forward, or if to go forward. So I think what you're asking is whether the Select Board is going to tell the people whether they're going to do it by amending the regulations or by amending or adopting an ordinance. I don't know that they're ready to do that.
No, my question is are they going to ask, how are they going to ask the town on what, if they want standards?
Well, that's what the public hearing is about.
Okay.
You know, that's why they're required to have a public hearing, just like we do. We will have a public hearing, and very probably at our next regular meeting, which is January 2nd, and we will have public input. Whatever public shows up, they'll tell us what they think.
But they'll be presented with something, and the select board also, if they came to the point of having an ordinance, would have an ordinance to present.
Oh, yeah.
It wouldn't just be to the public, you know, what do you all think we should do? It's like, here's our ordinance, what's your opinion?
Well,
I'm thinking back to the ATV situation.
The deadliest thing to do is to go to somebody and say, here's the problem, how do you think we should do it?
Yeah.
That's the deadliest thing you can do. The very best thing to happen is you identify what the problem is and you offer two solutions to choose from. And if either one of those doesn't apply, then you start all over. So
Can I go back to my original question? Let's say I want to start a short-term rental situation, and there's, we have this passes as a conditional use, and they set up a permitting structure with regulations. What do I have to do as a petitioner? Go get a permission from this group and then from that group, or not group, but that administrator.
You're
Get a
too far in
permit.
advance.
Well, I mean, it seems to me that by being part A, in what may or may not be a process, it's very confusing for the petitioner.
yeah. Well, let me point out what normally happens when we get an application for a conditional use. The conditional use applications come to the Zoning Board of Adjustment. That's the only body that can decide that. And as we have done before, we have an application that we review, and then we have a public hearing, at which all of the neighbors get invited and all the public. And then we make a decision. And the decision is yes, we will grant the permit because it meets all the conditions. Or no, because it doesn't meet all the conditions. You need to do more. So the decision is made by the Zoning Board of Adjustment. It doesn't go to anybody else.
But if there's an additional ordinance with regulations and permitting, then they have to pick up their books and go to the next step.
But that's the future.
Do we have anything like that now?
No.
In conditional use, where that's only the first step for the petitioner?
No. The conditional use is decided by the Zoning Board of Adjustment.
Right, and
That's
then
it.
they go do it.
And unless and until the Select Board adopts an ordinance or asks the voters for approval to change the regulations in additional ways, the zoning ordinance, the conditional use is enforced.
This is the first step going down, I don't want to say a slippery slope, but there are many other things that have to happen and get approved after this.
Perhaps if they adopt more regulations,
Right.
yes.
But now my question is, adopting those additional regulations, do we have to have public hearings?
Yes.
So this can go on for another couple of years.
No, they can adopt their own
It could
ordinance.
go
without a vote.
on for as long as the select board decides to do it.
This could have all been done a year ago.
It expired.
Well,
No, but they don't need us for an ordinance. They'll hear from the public and they'll say, okay, that's
Yeah.
interesting, we're gonna do X, Y, Z. So that could be very fast.
yeah, you're right. The
Except they
ordinance
don't
is
do
certainly
anything.
something that the select board will adopt. And/or, quite frankly, I think the sentiment I'm feeling on the board is that even if they want to do an ordinance, they will submit it to the voters. Yeah.
Is that a thing?
They don't want to be on the hook for that, but by themselves.
Is that even a thing? An ordinance is?
It's called CYA.
Well, sure, you can do anything you want.
Yeah, I did read
When
that.
you're
It's fine.
the legislative body of an entity. Yes, sir.
So this is jumping ahead, but if this is voted on and approved,
Yeah.
then for the existing 25-plus short-term rentals that we currently have in place in town, how are they notified? Are they grandfathered in, or?
I suspect that we will have to get a legal opinion about whether the regulations as adopted at town meeting could be retroactive. They may not be, they may be proactive. They may not affect what exists already. Because, you can't legislate for things that happened in the past.
But I have read that. I
Federal
think some
government's
towns-
trying to do that.
Some towns who have adopted new regulations have given existing homes a year or two to comply and seek a permit.
Well, that may be one of them.
But that, yeah.
Sure.
But I don't know that, they would have to somehow, those are ordinances.
But those.
And they don't have to do with the planning people.
Well, those are things that the select board needs
Yeah.
to decide and make sure that the public understands how that's gonna work. So,
So basically, Joe, I just want to reiterate something. This is the tip of the iceberg, because there are a lot of additional things that have to be approved to get to the final end. The question is do we have any sort of timeline?
I am
Or are
not,
we out for 2 or 3 years deciding on enforcement, registration, whatever?
I have to say that I do not know what's in the mind of the select board as to the timing of this thing is. I have no information. I suspect it will be as fast or as slow as they feel the citizens want that to be.
They want CYA.
Yeah.
I can't speak for the select board at all, but when I was at their meeting, what I heard was, in terms of timing, so this phase 1 thing that we're looking at tonight would be obviously a town meeting. It'll either get passed or it won't.
Yeah.
And phase 2, we've applied for a grant.
Yes.
Within another week or so, or at least by the end of this month, we'll know whether the grant.
Or is that the timing on the grant?
Yeah. And if you don't get it, I think some of the lawyers' comments are something that should happen anyway. Like some of them are like,
Well,
state law says these need to change.
Are done very quickly because it's just, one of the things the suggestion was, don't cite specific conditions, just cite what the statute says.
Yep.
And then if the statute changes, you don't have to change your ordinance. So, but those are the changes that we would make anyway if we did a revision. The harder things are going to be deciding what portions of the zoning regulations haven't worked well. And I don't know if anybody knows any of the zoning ordinances that we've had not working well. So, but that's, you know, but it will be useful, in my opinion, to have a look at the regulations as they are and make whatever changes with the help of the RPC staff. Make whatever changes make sense, you know. And so we'll see.
Jason, are you also helping them update the town plan?
Not at this point in time.
We haven't talked about the town plan at all.
Not at this point. I mean, I can't remember the cycle. I think you got a few years before that.
Well, there is the timeline on the I think I reported that on the last ZBA meeting. The legislature changed the timing of the readoption. They used to have a 5-year rotation where you'd have to reapply or redesign or readopt the town plan. Now it's 8 years, and we're good until 2026. So we've got a couple of years before we have to do that.
I'm happy to have this as a conditional use in a theoretical way, but I just don't understand how that works. I mean, I've been here for controversial applications from the restaurant to the pot farm to, I mean, I just don't see how a thing like this works. We have regulations. What are the 5 things? We have to have parking. We have to have
Trash.
Is it trash? I don't even
Well,
know.
I don't remember them all.
But
I just know there are 5.
I mean, I don't even see how that.
I don't know. What is the benefit to the people of Andover?
Well, I mean, I can see the benefit.
Except for the 24 that are already around.
Right. I mean, I see the benefit.
You don't have noisy neighbors the
No,
way
I do see the benefit in a full-on plan. You're gonna have short-term rentals that don't bother your neighbors, and here's how. But this is like, it seems to me a waste of everybody's time to say, oh, well, it's not like a restaurant, pot farm. I mean, what do we have to do with that if there's no regulations?
That's not one I'm going to touch with a 10-foot pole. I'm going to check.
He's going to answer.
I'll try to answer at least part of it. So what are the standards? So, if the town decides to include short-term rentals as a conditional use, you would go through the conditional use standards and say, okay, how does it affect the capacity of existing and planned community facilities? How many?
That'll have municipal services.
Right.
This is the facility right here.
Then, character of the area affected.
That's a big deal.
That's the bigger conversation. There's traffic on roads and highways in the vicinity.
That's what neighbors complain about.
The bylaws then in effect. I don't know that there would be any other bylaws that would affect it, but maybe there's something else in here. And then utilization of renewable energy resources. So it's character of the area and traffic.
And also, don't forget that
There's more to it.
the zoning board of adjustment, in its wisdom, in granting a conditional use, may attach other reasonable requirements. So it's not the end. That 5-category thing is not the end. We can reasonably say that by doing this, you have to do that. Those kind of things. But those are reasonable things.
So, the property down by you, Nick, off of Middletown Road, is that a short-term rental?
There's nothing now. I mean, it's just a barn or a garage now.
Okay.
You're talking about the one that's up on Broadway?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a barn now. I mean, that was, his theory was he was gonna do similar to what they wanted to do up on 100, do like 3 or 4 little micro houses, and I think the state shot that down due to due to the wetland issue that's up there. So now he's just doing a single house and a garage with an apartment overhead, but it's seriously just a shed up there now. It's hunting up there Sunday.
Okay.
I mean, I have no idea.
I didn't know if they had to have a conditional permit for it.
But the thing also you need to remember is that we no longer do septic design approval.
Or pot of water.
I know that's just-
That has been done by the state for, must be 10 years now. So they have, you know, they have that to deal with.
I just keep thinking about the restaurant, this is up on a dirt road that goes to the sky, and there's 6 neighbors, and they didn't want it, and they had good reasons that they can barely get up that hill themselves in the winter. You're gonna have a truck with food, and you're gonna have people backing out into our road, which is gonna kill our children. All of that. I mean, we can barely fit them into the office. And we made regulations, and the restaurant was happy to comply, where they had to have a parking lot where people could turn around, so they're not backing into the road. They had they wanted a limited number of events per year, and the neighbors didn't know that. Now, okay, so we're gonna give them a limited number, which we said once a month. They asked for once a month, and we said, okay, 12, and then condensing them into the summer. So, it seems to me that the ways that we were able to placate the neighbors by the skin of our teeth have to do also with what the petitioner wanted. They were happy to comply with those things. Well, now I'm looking at what the neighbors on the ridge are wanting. And they come in here and they say, we don't want cars zigzagging up the road. We don't want wetlands. We don't want trash. And, you know, they're gonna come here and that's what they're gonna say. How are we gonna, how are we gonna make that petitioner feel when other people are already have houses on the road that they rent?
You want to talk about traffic? First house on the road in the ridge is a double wide trailer now. That was grandfathered on a 1-acre lot. 3/4 of the way up, a house is under construction now, it's $4 million. And you want to talk about traffic with cement trucks?
Well, when you're building, you know, everybody accepts that when you're building.
But they're doing it like every day.
So I just,
Cranes going up with steel.
I don't know, I'm picturing the neighbors coming in. We have no way to solve their problem.
You understand that the neighbors and the people affected by this activity would like nothing better than for us to say, stop it, we're not permitting it, period, that's it. You can't do that.
You can do it.
We're not,
No, you can't.
not allowed to do that.
Yes, you are.
No.
I mean, for everything I read, you can do it, or you certainly can discourage it as much as you would like.
We can't
You could say you can only rent that for 6 months out of the year, or it has to be hosted, or a million other, discouraging.
One of the things that I read, we cannot do.
Well, it says if you want to say no STRs, you better get a lawyer, that was what it said.
Yeah.
But it didn't say you couldn't do it. It didn't say you couldn't do it. You can ban STRs from the town.
But why would you?
Huh?
But why would you?
What's the benefit?
I love Michelle Wilcox. I think she's a wonderful person. But I cannot afford to eat there every weekend. So who's going to go there and spend $20 for a sandwich? It's not the people that work in this community. It's the people that visit this community. So we have 2 choices.
What, are you talking about some restaurant somewhere?
Yeah, Heritage Deli.
The deli, the Heritage Deli.
There, Chester.
Yeah.
Well, there's 2 sides.
So here's your 2 choices. You can either have short-term rentals, or you can have short-term residents. And from my point of view, I see no difference. I see no difference between the Thursday night traffic that goes up the hill, leaves on Sunday night, Monday morning, whether they're a resident of that house or whether they're renting the house. There's no difference to me.
Well, there's no retail in Andover. Nobody in Andover is going to benefit. No Andover, residents, unless they own businesses in the perimeter.
Right. Like I don't work in Andover, but I benefit greatly from huge hospitals that are within 5-hour travel of here. So should we not have big hospitals? So that doesn't work. The people that benefit from this are locals, they're caretakers, they're restaurant owners. Raoul is a great example. I would love to be able to go to every one of their people and say, every one of their customers, are you renting short-term yet?
It's also detrimental to some things, like the school system where they can't get employees.
But it's no different, than short-term residents.
Well, it is though.
It's not.
It is because I'm all in favor of short-term rental, I'll just be here, but there is a difference. If you own a home and you spend weekends here, you feel a member of the community, you much more so than if you've got a bunch of guys together for the weekend and you're never gonna come back.
I disagree, because what I see from the short-term residents that revolve around me is a campground attitude. And they come up on Thursday nights and they run their ATVs, their side-by-sides, with total disregard for our rules. And they own these houses. They're people I know, because they've owned these houses for 5 years. They're the ones that are causing the problems in my area.
I guess
because they're just up for the weekend.
Right.
They have this campground mentality. This is where they get away to. They have zero respect for those that live and work, grew up here, would love to raise their children to stay here, but have made it impossible. There's no difference in my eye between a short-term resident and a short-term rental. And if we're going to regulate short-term rentals, I would love to regulate short-term residents. And if you want to abolish short-term rentals, I would love nothing more than to abolish part-time residents.
I agree, but we can't do that legally.
We cannot tell someone you can't rent out your house. This is 2024. 40 years ago? Definitely. Who the hell ever heard of this, right?
We're making the rules for the town of Andover, so we can do that, or we can go just above that and say you have to be a hosted rental. You have to do it for only so many months out of the year.
Can we tell that to a short-term resident?
Short-term resident?
The person that comes up on Thursday and, Thursday night and leaves Sunday night.
Yes.
Can you tell that to that person that you have to physically live in this town?
Because they are not resident voters.
Okay?
They're taxpayers.
They're taxpayers.
Yeah, but resident voters make the rules.
So we can tell people you have to live in your house for 180 days out of the calendar year.
No.
I don't think
You're shaking your head, you're saying yes.
you own a home.
Exactly. Thank you very much for saying that. I appreciate that. That's the crux of what we have. You own a home.
But if the home is owned by some Airbnb corporation, and it's just being rented on a straight-up basis, and it's not owned by someone in town. No,
but these houses that I'm talking about are owned by people that are in this town. They're owned by people that live in New York City, Hartford, Connecticut, New Jersey.
Right.
I don't see so much Massachusetts up there.
I understand.
So
there's also a corporate environment that's buying up homes as
Well, the solution to that some towns have done, which I don't picture our select board doing, is, which apparently has been legal, that when you buy a home, this short-term rental prohibits new owners for 2 years from getting permits for short-term rental.
That would bump out the corporate guys, because they can't be home and invest.
Not that you have to live there, you could leave it vacant, but you can't get a permit. That apparently exists, right, in some of the towns.
As
an owner of a house,
Hello, it's James Stack.
you're going to tell me that I can't sell to the highest bidder?
No, you can sell to the
Because the person that wants to pay premium dollar for my land is the corporation that's going to turn around and rent it. So you're now restricting my income as a town?
You're restricting their income.
But no, I'm restricting my income. Because now that person that can't rent it in this town is saying, I don't want to buy it. So that highest bidder came down.
Can I get, James Stack is wanting to say something. James, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Joe. I think that we're talking about two issues here. There are landowners and then there are corporate owners. And that is something that we should possibly deal with separately. And when I mean that, together, so that hotels or any corporations that end up buying into our town perhaps have a different standard than homeowners who come up here and ski all winter and yet want to then rent during the summer their homes. I think that's a great, I think we have two different, great, whatever. I think, you know, the fact that that's been brought up by, I can't remember the gentleman to your right, Joe, and then Kip, that those are two things that make a difference in what we're discussing here. Landowners, homeowners versus corporations. And that's something that I think should be taken into consideration. I would also, Joe, just like to know, because I missed like the first 3 minutes of the meeting. We're here tonight. The objective of tonight's meeting is to do what? Thank you.
To do what in this meeting is, as I said, in the agenda, is to review and discuss the proposed changes to, the two changes to the zoning regulations that the select board has proposed for us to consider.
But we're not here tonight to vote on anything, then.
We are here tonight to review what has been offered and to set a public hearing date at which we will invite the public to comment on these two proposals. And I suspect that our next meeting will be our public hearing date. I think it's January 2nd.
And these two proposals we've agreed should be what is voted on or discussed by the public.
Well, we will hear what the public has to say, yes, of course.
So we need to vote on those, Joe? Is that then the purpose of tonight's meeting, is to vote on those two proposals?
No, we're not voting on the two proposals. We are reviewing and discussing them. What we will do is to solicit public input at our next meeting. And after that, we will decide what recommendations to make for the select board's consideration. And after that, the select board will have its own public hearing and hear from the public what they think. And then they will make a decision whether to submit that proposal to the March meeting.
So neither of these two proposals deal with the issue that was just brought up, which is ownership of individuals versus ownership of corporations.
Yeah, James, you're right. The proposal here is very simple, is to add a short-term rental definition to the definition page, and to add short-term rentals as a conditional use to the existing regulations. It makes no other changes.
Thank you, Joe, for clarifying.
Okay. Any further discussion? Again, as I said, we've discussed all of those things that the select board will eventually have to decide upon. It's not something that is in this proposal. So I would like to get a feel for the members if we have enough information to go to a public hearing.
I think we should adopt the regulations as proposed.
We will,
I still have a motion.
I would ask you not to make that motion because
I didn't make a
we're not
motion.
adopting it.
I didn't make a motion.
I'm sorry.
I said I insisted my personal opinion.
Yes, thank you. That's good. So, what I'm asking basically is an agreement by the members that we have reviewed the proposal. We will have enough information to go to a public hearing. The public hearing will be scheduled for this, January 2nd of 2024. Is that right?
Yes, okay, that's all fine with me, Joe, but I strongly object to the process. I think Part A, Part B, Part C is gonna drive the town crazy. And that they're gonna sit there, they're gonna ask us questions next month, and we don't know.
I don't feel like we have enough information. Because enforcement is gonna be, from what I remember from the last time we did, the enforcement was huge. And I have no way of answering, as I don't think anybody on this board, how are we gonna enforce this?
That's coming up. That's one of the things that has to be decided.
Let me just reiterate what I said before. If the short-term rental becomes a conditional use, applications for that use will come to the Board of Adjustment. The Board of Adjustment will review and analyze how it complies with the regulations for a conditional use, period. And they will decide whether it meets the requirements and issue a permit if that is what they decide, and attach whatever reasonable conditions are appropriate. There is no other review that is going to take place. The Board of Adjustment will be the body that deals with the application, no one else. And that's how it stands. If this is the only change that is made to the regulations forever, that's how it's going to work. Now, if the board decides that they want more regulations, they want perhaps a registration fee or a reporting requirement every year, but those are things that they need to decide in a separate, either an ordinance or in another amendment to the regulations. But what we are doing here tonight is very simple. We are saying that we are reviewing that the select board wants short-term rentals to become a conditional use. And in order to make sure that we know what we're doing, they have added the identification of what it means that the short-term rentals. And that's a definition that the state has adopted. So, to answer your question, we have no idea how they're going to enforce it. That has been, and you're right, that has been one of my biggest concerns when we went through this report, is how you're going to enforce it if you adopt a lot of regulations.
Even if you don't, even if all you have is this zoning condition that says you need to apply for a conditional use permit, how do we enforce that?
That comes down the road.
Well, because everybody's gonna be like, oh, well, Joe's down there, he's renting it, but he's not using Airbnb, he just rents it out to friends and family, and, you know what I mean? That's the enforcement part that I'm not, how do we make sure that someone is actually applying for this conditional use permit that we're requiring them to use?
And following the conditions.
Well,
and then on top of it, right, but the first part is, how are we going to know that there's a house in this town that is being rented under our definition of short term that has a conditional use without driving up there every Friday and writing down license plate? Like,
You should know what your neighbors are doing.
no, I should have absolutely zero information about all my neighbors
I do not live in a communist society. You should stay the hell out of my front yard.
I'm not asking you to stay off of your property. I'm saying drive down the road and see what's going on.
No.
I do not want to know what my neighbors are doing. I totally agree.
Promise you don't want to know what I'm doing. Let's get back to what it is that we're about to do. And I have an agreement by that we will warn a public hearing on this issue for January 2nd. All of you agree? Is there any objections?
Yes,
Yes, James, go ahead.
I object. I don't think we're ready for a public hearing on it.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion, I have an agreement by most of the members, and I will ask the town clerk to warn a public hearing for January 2nd for another planning commission meeting at which we will have a public hearing on the issue of short-term rentals. Correct?
I think we're going to hear the same things we heard at the last public meeting. How to enforce it, whether corporations versus private owners, et cetera, the same thing. But you know what? We need to hear it again, I guess, and that's great. Thank you, Joe, for having this meeting. And thank you, Lorraine, for laughing at me.
Okay, having decided that we're going to have a public hearing, there's one item on the agenda that must be on every agenda, is a public comment period. You are our public comment.
No.
I'm ready to hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion, George made the motion to adjourn at 6:47. We are adjourned.